Hey there, it's me, Gretchen Rubin, coming to you live from my apartment in New York City for the Coping with COVID-19 conversations. In a minute, we're going to be joined by my co-host, my sister Elizabeth. But while I'm getting her joining, tell us where you're watching from. We always love to see where people are in the world. And did you read for an hour this weekend? Did you read? How was it? Are you reading anything you'd recommend? We would love to know. Okay, and here's Elizabeth. Oh, yeah. Look, oh, good. It's fun to see all these people joining. Toronto. Good, excellent. Now, where's Elizabeth? There she is. Hello.
Hi.
Hey, how are you? Oh, 36 in Lexington.
Good.
Somebody's right down the street from me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, hey.
Hey, how are you?
I asked everybody whether they did their reading. I was just talking to a reporter who was saying how she's reading short stories because she finds that that's easier than like getting into a book. And she also made a point, and thumbs up if you think this is true, that the key is to get 15 minutes in. That once you're 15 minutes in, then you're locked in, like to a novel.
Yes.
But it's you kind of need to you might need to kind of keep pushing. And I definitely find that for me, the longer I read, the more likely I am to keep reading. I go deeper and deeper into it. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. The first few minutes are definitely the hardest. Yeah. I mean, and that's especially true when you're starting a book.
Yeah.
So yes. Starting a book is the absolute hardest. Once you're into it, it's easier to go back.
Yeah.
But even if you're just in it, it can be hard to just actually start reading.
Yes. Yeah. And if you're just joining us, it's Gretchen Raven and Elizabeth Krapp. We're the hosts of the Happier with Gretchen Raven podcast. This is the Coping with COVID-19 conversations. And we're kicking it off by asking everybody about the weekend challenge. Did you read for an hour? And I'm also curious, did people read like 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, 1 hour? But yeah, that's why I don't like reading short stories, because I feel like for me, it takes a lot of work to get into a world. And so reading a book of short stories is like doing that over and over again. Whereas I like to sink into a novel. But some people like,
I'm that way too.
They like the kind of brevity of the, there's a lot that you can do in a short story you can't do in a novel. We're seeing lots of thumbs up and hands up.
And a lot of different books people are reading. What Alice Forgot is one that someone mentioned, which I have on my book stand. It's something my sister-in-law, Olivia, recommended to me years ago.
Yes.
She's a huge reader, and I have it, but I have not read it yet.
Well, I highly recommend it because it's kind of a study in happiness. It's about a woman who loses her memory or part of her memory. And it's like, what happens when she forgets and what happens when she remembers. It's really interesting. Is that Liane Moriarty?
Yes. Who wrote Big Little Lies?
Yes.
Someone, a lot of different books.
Yeah.
It's hard. I can't mention them
Duck's
all.
Newport Report. I heard that was good. Somebody said, oh, I got into comics books this weekend. I blew through 3 volumes of Saga plus some other reading. Okay. If you know anything about me, you know that I love the Binge Mode podcast. I love Malory Rubin and Jason, concepción, and they have another fan, Jason Mantzoukas, the really well-known actor and comedian. Turns out he's just a huge fan of Binge Mode. So they've had him on a couple times, and they just very recently did an Ask the Underscore, which is sort of their Ask Us Anything. And so they were all talking about comics, and Jason Mantzoukas was saying that he was finding it much easier to read comics and graphic novels because it was just working for him. And so that is a world I don't know much about, but they talk about a ton of recommendations that sounded terrific. So if you're interested, or if you find like right now, you're finding it easier to get into that world and read that way, comics and graphic novels. I knew nothing of any of the references they were making, but they sounded like they knew what they were talking about. And like Jason Mantzoukas has like a comic shop that he goes into, like a person would go into an indie bookstore. So sounds like
Jack loves going to the comic book store. Jack likes comic
There
books.
You go. Well, see, I mean, I find that they're more work.
I cannot read. I refuse to read comic books with Jack because I find them completely baffling. I never know what to read when. Yes. I don't enjoy them at all, but I mean, so many people do. So,
and even if
and someone says you can get comics on Libby as well. Yes. When Libby, as we've mentioned, is a library app. where you can keep getting library books.
Yes. So how about you? What is the form that you are taking your books in? Are you reading paper? Are you reading Are you listening to audio? Are you reading graphics and comics where there's that illustrated or that kind of the what do you call it? Like the graphic element where it's in the cells. If you, by the way, I cannot resist mentioning, there's an amazing book that is fascinating, even if you don't like comics, which I'm not a huge fan of comics, called Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. Give a thumbs up if you read this book. This is a fascinating book, basically about the nature of art, but somebody said to me, like, you have to run out and read this book right away. It will blow your mind. And I've read it twice, and just talking about it makes me want to read it again. It's a fascinating book, basically about communication and simplicity and meaning and negative space and cues, and it's just an absolutely fascinating book. So
Gretch, here's a question I have for people, because I find that in some ways I'm actually more drawn to reading something more challenging, because it's like, because it takes more brain power, it's more absorbing. Right. For instance, I'm reading, and after I finish Home Cooking, I'm going to start the next. I read Rabbit Run, the John Updike book, which is like not what I would call easy reading. I mean, and then I'm going to read the next one. I mean, I read them like 30 years ago, but I'm going to reread them. And in a way, that's more appealing to me, because it's like watching Chernobyl. It's like I feel like it's more bringing me in. Yeah. Whereas I have less of an interest in reading a romance novel, which I love romance novels. Right. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. And I don't know what psychological thing. Right. Someone's saying, what is Rabbit Run about? It's about a 25-year-old guy who's somewhat newly married and is having sort of a 20-something, not a midlife, life crisis. Pretty dark. It's very dark. Yeah. But anyway, so it's just, I don't know if anyone else is feeling like I am, that they actually want a challenge because it's taking them away. Well, and if somebody feels that way, the book that I would recommend is Gilead by Marilyn Robinson. It's a beautiful book. It's a totally absorbing book. It's a towering classic of world literature. It's pure and good in a way that will just make you feel like you're inside a pure and good person. So it's so refreshing. But it's not a quick read. It's a book where you're reading every sentence. And so I think you would find it really absorbing, but also kind of cleansing. If anybody's read, or Marilyn Robinson, actually, her next book was announced that it's coming out in September. So there's been all the Marilyn Robinson fans like me are losing our minds. Love Gilead. There you go. Somebody says, do we read or advise any poetry books? I don't read any poetry. Elizabeth, do you read poetry? I really don't. Not unless I have a reason. I'm looking for like a poem for something. I never read poetry, which I should. Well,
someone says here, I can reread heavy books now, but not new ones. Well, I'm a huge fan of rereaders. Give me a thumbs up if you're a rereader. I love to reread. And actually in Binge Mode, they were talking, Malory Rubin was saying she's kind of caught because she wants the pleasure of rereading, and there's a lot of value to rereading, but then it's the opportunity cost of not exposing yourself to something new. I'm experiencing this because we're watching Game of Thrones as a family, questionable judgment with a 15-year-old. We fast forward through the porn. She's always like, is this a porny part? I'm like, yes, it is. Another porny part. But the characters are so amazing. I just wanted her to see it. But it's keeping me from Mad Men, which is like hanging over my head. I know I would love it. It's the opportunity cost. You get something different out of something, revisiting it. And I do think that it's easier in a way to appreciate it if you've been through it once. I think I get more out of it the second time. Flannery O'Connor. Oh my gosh. I'm sitting right next to my Flannery O'Connor, like giant stack of Flannery O'Connor, hugest Flannery O'Connor fan.
Someone else listened to Anna Karenina, so that's audio.
That's an amazing book.
Ooh, I loved Anna.
Oh, somebody says I've also been catching up on magazines I got backlogged on. I know it's so old school. How many people are reading magazines? I can't get into magazines. We have a stack like this high, and I keep thinking this is the perfect time to read magazines, but I can't get into.
If not now, when?
If not now, when? I don't like in my day. I just haven't found time for it. Okay, so if you're just joining us, it's Gretchen Raven and Elizabeth Kraft. We're the hosts of the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast. And we're talking about this week's challenge, which was to read an hour a week. But Elizabeth, this reminds me of something else that you and I were talking about, which is sort of a larger happiness stumbling block, which is, I think a lot of us kind of like, okay, we went through the shock of what's happening, and it's like, okay, mind blown. Everything's got to be rejiggered. Then kind of this rush of energy. I'm going to stock my pantry. I'm going to use all my wiles to get toilet paper. And I'm going to figure out all these systems for my household and just do everything right. Then the inertia that you said, getting up out of bed. And now there's even another thing that's setting in, which is the good habits that we're trying to create are kind of dropping. We started off doing family meditation, and now we're not.
When someone mentioned it in our Happier in Hollywood Facebook group this weekend, something I've been noticing, which is what she called COVID clutter.
COVID clutter.
So there was the initial clutter clearing. Yes. People are like, I have all this time. I'm going to clean my closets and organize my pantry and this and that.
But I also think that's tied to the instinct for preparation. I think for a lot, just when you're going to have a baby, you have the nesting instinct. I think there's kind of this thing I got to get everything in order. Everything's got to be prepared for what's coming. But now,
that
was a month ago.
So that was done. And now it's the clutter is building back up for people.
Yeah.
I mean, I can even say my office, which I had sort of semi-cleaned at the beginning of all this, is now just very, very cluttered. The Easter Bunny didn't want to hide any eggs in here because it was too much chaos to find an egg.
Right.
So COVID clutter is definitely a thing.
There's COVID crabbiness and COVID clutter. Well, I think part of the clutter is that for a lot of people, the load on the house is just so much more. We have so many dishes.
Oh, yeah.
And
I ordered 2 weeks in advance a huge thing of dishwashing.
Yeah.
So because I'm this dishwasher is running more than it ever has.
Yeah. And just people just use cooking in the kitchen and people coming and going. Also, what we find is that we're having to use parts of our apartment in different ways. So Eleanor had to do yoga for her online PE class. So she moved all this furniture around so that she could do her yoga. But so then it's all messy looking, or I'm here in my room and in this room. And so there's I moved a little table to a place so I could put my tripod on it. And then but I don't go back and put everything. So everything's even just out of order because, it's okay, this is where we do homeschooling, or this is where, we're set up this giant puzzle. And so the whole room has to be cleared out. Eleanor was also saying, if I need to set up this, I have to do this project, where should I do it? And I was I'm well, we've got a card table. I could, if you need a table, I guess, rig it up. And so that also creates a sense of disorder because things are just moved out of place. And you can't, it doesn't even really make sense to move them back into place because everything.
Yeah. But even going outside, Gretch, I'm walking, I'm doing the treadmill, but obviously it'd be nice for me to walk outside as much as possible. But I just find myself going, if I open the door, I have to figure out what the weather is and decide if I need a jacket or not. It's so much easier just to walk on the treadmill and watch a show or listen to a podcast. It's even just going outside feels, well, of course, we also have had a lot of rain in LA.
It was so unusual.
Which is so unusual, but I'm just I don't feel like thinking about it. Yeah. Who cares? I'll go outside someday.
Right. Oh, so many people are saying how many dishes they have. They're so many dishes. Oh, someone, Gold Star is currently walking my 20 for 20 and listening. Okay, Gold Star, you're doing your 20 for 20. And Elizabeth, I do want to remind you, maybe this isn't such a big deal in LA because you've got a big backyard and everything, but you do want to go out and get in the sunlight, especially in the early morning. We really need that sunlight in our face. That's really going to boost our mood, immune function. It resets that circadian rhythm. If you're having trouble sleeping, really try to get that morning light. That's one of the reasons I made my husband Jamie, now he gets up and we walk Barnaby together because mornings are low for him. And I'm like, if you get that morning light in your face, that might help you. And a little bit of exercise, and a little bit of like, you know, chatter with me, like we're just talking about whatever. So you do want to get it. Your house is so full of light, and you're in Los Angeles. Maybe it's not such a big deal, but I have to kind of badger. Again, I'm trying to put down my clipboard, but one of the things I want to do is make Eliza and Eleanor be sure that they go outside and get enough.
Yes, I do need to go out and get that vitamin D. I need to make sure Jack does.
Right.
You know, one of those, we need it.
Yeah. And we talked about the importance of sunshine on a podcast episode. I can't remember one.
Yes.
Oh, episode 244. It is. Oh, someone says having a dog is the best COVID cure. Yes. Many people have been, have been talking about how great it is to have a dog. And many people are saying, or like, I think we quoted this person on the podcast, somebody saying there's no bad weather, only bad clothes. And several people have been saying that they are living by that. And then in LA, but it is like, oh, which boots do I put on? I got to grab an umbrella. This umbrella's broken. Where's the other umbrella? I got to put on sunscreen. Like, you know, if you've got a, if somebody says, I'm clearing clutter, but I can't donate anywhere right now, so the donation pile is growing. Yes, it's frustrating when you cannot make those runs to the thrift store or to your neighbor or whoever. A lot of
another form of the inertia, Gretchen, is in eating, because even though we're snacking aside, for a while I was like, all right, this is my time. I'm roasting vegetables, and I was cutting vegetables and doing the olive oil and roasting them. And now I'm like, it's so much trouble to cut a zucchini. Why bother? I'll just have an apple with peanut butter. Like, you see what I'm saying? It's like everything just feels like a lot of trouble. And I mean, it's that inertia. It's just like, it's almost like this physical malaise.
So here's like an alternative interpretation of this. Okay. So I was extremely struck. I think I did a little happier episode about this line that Laura Ingalls Wilder, you know, who I'm obsessed with, wrote in this regional paper, where she was like, what is it about these days? Like, everybody's like strained, and you see all, like, in people's faces, there's no time for anything. Like, people are so rushed. It's like, what's going on? She wrote that in 1924 when she lived in a small rural town in the Ozarks. So I'm like, it's not necessarily Twitter and Facebook and social media. Maybe it's just us. And the fact is, it's like, people are like, I have no time. Like, it's so hard to get yourself to do yoga. It's so hard to get yourself to make the bed. It's like, maybe it's not anything else but us. Like, maybe, you know, and so it's like,
just like I always go through a period where for like 4 days I'll roast vegetables and then not roast them for like 3.5 months. It's just the same thing. It just happens to be right now I'm at home.
Right. Well, I know, because you think like, well, and it's sort of like, I wrote about this in Better Than Before, about the strategy of loopholes, because a lot of times loopholes kind of work either way. It's like, well, how can I do it when I'm stuck at home all the time? Well, how can I do it where I'm running around all the time? It's like, either way, there's a loophole for that. Like, there's a loophole for that's why I loved studying loopholes. They were so hilarious. And like, one of my dreams is to write like a little book of, like, the little book of loopholes, because the loopholes are hilarious. My favorite loophole. Tell me your favorite loophole in the comments. I would love to hear your favorite loophole if you're aware of it. Part of the problem is it's hard to be aware of that. My favorite loophole. Somebody emailed me because we were in a recent Evil Donut Bringer conversation. Or the thing about, I think it was like, it was when we were talking on the podcast, are you team you do you, or are you team let's all join in? So somebody was saying her loophole is, if it's got writing on it, it doesn't count. So if it says like, happy birthday, Elizabeth, it doesn't count. And I was like, I would not have thought of that one.
That's a good loophole.
That's a good loophole. So anyway, I would love.
Yes, people are listing their loopholes. I deserve it.
Yes.
It's a fallacy.
Yeah. Too tired to exercise. Yes. I'll do it later. Yeah. Oh, I deserve it. It's been a hard day. The thing about loopholes is that a lot of times there is an element of truth to them. So it's not that they're totally fake, and that makes them harder to resist, I think, because, you know, it's not like it's not true that you're really tired. It's not true. It is true that this is a really tough time. And so, my favorite loophole is no one saw me eat it. Oh, that's
I'm definitely guilty of that.
This one is, if I start tomorrow, I will be more motivated. Okay. Now there's an even more, there's an even kind of more deceptive or trickier version of this, which is if I overindulge now, I will be better suited later. If I gorge myself on this now, then tomorrow I won't want it. If I spend a ton in December, then I will naturally want to cut back in January. And usually that doesn't happen. If you're interested in loopholes, this is a big chapter in my book, Better Than Before, which is all about how to change habits. Because a lot of times loopholes are what we give ourselves to explain why we're not keeping a habit. So we invoke a loophole to say, well, you know, with everything going on, how could I be expected to read for an hour over the weekend or whatever?
The one I've been using, and I've mentioned it here several times, is the apocalypse.
Yes, that's the this doesn't count.
And one of our viewers just said the worldwide pandemic is there's a worldwide pandemic is her loophole. And that's definitely the one that has been, I've been using. It's a good one. I mean, you know.
Yes. Well, this gets us back to this thing. And I wrote a blog post about it, which is, there's sort of two schools of thought. One is I want to go easy on myself. And the other one is I want to ask more of myself. And I think the way I try to think about it is that both are true. And it's not like I should go easy on myself. And therefore it's just like, you know, throw like nothing counts. I'm just going to like do anything. And I don't want to ask so much of myself that it's like I'm being making unrealistic demands of myself of like being super productive and focused and like more diligent than I've ever been before in my life. But I think we can do, you know, I think that sort of both can be true.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think, and someone mentioned this in the comments of like, how do I want to be when this is over?
Yes.
You know, and we keep saying that what do you want to have not cleared any clutter? Do you want to not have done any work or done any studying? I mean, and that's obviously we're talking about those of us who are in a lucky position of being safe at home and not having pressing, you know, concerns, just kind of struggling with the, as we said, malaise.
I was talking to a woman today who she works full time and she has 3 children under the age of 5.
Yes. I mean, there are people, also teachers are working so hard. I mean, I've heard from so many teachers, both that I know and I'm just, you know, online, who, I mean, switching over to a whole new way of learning, they're suddenly working twice as many hours. So those people are obviously not just concerned about clearing a closet. They're just like, you know, getting through.
Well, and even teachers, but then more broadly, give a thumbs up if you have really struggled with some aspect of technology, because I think for a lot of people, it's like, people are like, well, just load that into Dropbox. And you're like, what is this Dropbox that you speak of? Or like, it's a WAV file. I'm like, what is a WAV file? Or, I mean, it's this, and the thing is, if people understand it, they're often not very good at, and then everybody's got kind of a different setup. So people are like, look at your lower right-hand thing, and you're like, there's nothing there. And they're like, do you see 3 dots? No, I don't see 3 dots. Or people are always saying to me, are you on a Mac? I'm like, no, I'm not on a Mac. And they're like, oh, well, then I can't help you. I'm like, so thumbs up if you feel, because I think we'll all feel a lot better if we realize we are not the only ones who are struggling with this.
Well, and Jack can use, thank goodness, technology much more than I can, because my biggest frustration is trying to deal with his school stuff. I mean, again, parents are like doing all this, teachers and parents, stuff they've never done before. And I will like be ripping my hair out. Like, I don't see how to move this art, you know, this picture of his drawing into the art file. And then usually he'll eventually figure it out on his own. But it can really drive you batty. Now, Gretchen, on the inertia front, here's something that I have found very helpful.
Oh, yes.
So maybe others will find it helpful. And I may have mentioned it before, but I am not a to-do list person. Sarah and I argue over this. I do not do to-do lists. She loves to-do lists.
Yes.
But I have started very small to-do lists during this time. So this includes really small things like call so-and-so, you know, or cut my fingernails, go to the grocery store. I mean, you know, these are not like, and then, you know, walk 20 minutes. Yeah. So it really does help me to write down these small things to get the inertia, like to fight the inertia.
And do you think that's because it just sort of reminds you of what you want to get done, or as an obliger, you feel sort of obligated to the list, or it gives you a sense of control to have like things written down?
Probably the obliger part of it. It's like, then now I may not do it that day, even like, but at least then it's on a list. Like a friend I owe a call to. Yeah. I had on the list Friday, or call Allison. Yeah. And I didn't, but like, it's on my mind now. I need to call back, you know what I mean? And I want to, but so it is helping me. And it's funny because what's interesting is a subject that comes up a lot is, are there things about this time you'll continue? Yes. You know, like Zoom hangouts with people across the country. And I wondered if to-do lists are something that I'll like take away with me from this time, or if it'll just fall away.
Well, and how many people have been making to-do lists, which is where you write down all the things you've already done? Because I think some people really love doing to-do lists. And I think for some obligers, especially obligers who maybe tip more to the rebel side, Elizabeth, you're an obliger who tips more to upholder. So obliger rebellion isn't as common for you, but the obligers who tip to rebel, a lot of times they do start feeling kind of pushed around and resentful. And I think, or they don't like being criticized. And a to-do list, it is a nudge. And so I think sometimes obligers like having to-do lists because it's like they're giving themselves a gold star for what they've accomplished. And that energizes them to move forward. For a lot of people, like thinking of what they've done actually makes them want to do more. Whereas I think for other people like me, I don't really care about that. Like I will usually start a list with something I've already done or that I could do in the first 5 minutes, just to like get something crossed off. But I think the to-do list is and then rebels, you know, if you're a rebel, you could do a could-do list, a might-could list. These are just things you could do if you feel like it or not, you know. And if you don't know if you're an obliger or a rebel or an upholder, the quiz is at quiz.gretchenrubin.com. Take the quiz. You will learn so much about yourself. Yeah. Oh, somebody, all these people are having trouble with their technology, with their Wi-Fi, with their, you know, their apps. I mean, it's hard. Somebody says, I'm 81 years old and I use Zoom. If I can do it, anyone can do it. Our parents use Zoom. We had it. No, I think we used FaceTime for Easter. We all got together and I think it was FaceTime, but they can do Zoom too.
Zoom with mom and dad. We need to do all of us.
Yes, we do. We do. I don't know how to send out a Zoom invitation.
But, you know, that's another inertia situation. I think, again, at first, people were very like, oh, let's set up our Zoom hangout. Let's set up this. Let's have a mom's night happy hour. And now everyone's just like, oh, I can't be bothered.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, I mean, I will say, Gretch, here is the reality. Zoom is great. But it is not the same as hanging out, you know, and it's just, in a way, sometimes it's just easier. Sometimes it's just, if you want to just retreat and like not deal.
But I also think there's something else, which is I think a lot of people like Jamie is on Zoom or conference calls all day long. I mean, like I'm still writing and, you know, doing this and maybe like a little interview here and there, but he is just like, I think the idea that I'm going to, after a long day with work, then I'm going to go on Zoom. It's not the same thing as like, now I'm going to go to a pleasant restaurant and like relax. And it's going to be like the sensory, you know, I'm writing about the senses and like a restaurant, it's like, there's smell, there's music, there's people, there's the flavors, there's just like walking down the street, there's the neighborhood. Whereas it's like Zoom, Zoom, Zoom all day. I don't want to Zoom at night. I'm like, you know, it's just like your ears start to ring. And your eyes kind of glaze out.
Someone said they could hear their mom saying, "This is boring" during a Zoom call.
Oh, really? Well, that's the thing. I mean, well, you know, it's like have show and tell, or I don't know. I mean, it's
yes. The hard thing is knowing whose turn it is to talk, and then half the time you can't hear what people are saying. So it's a great thing. But again, you know, nothing is a substitute for actually seeing someone in real life.
Okay, but how many people have found that if, like, let's say you're doing it in a friend situation, you don't want to have, and you could have couples, because we do that often as couples. So there's like 2 screens, each of us has 2 people. I think more than 3 like screens of people talking, it starts to become too hard. It's not like a dinner party where you can have 10 people or 12 people around a dinner table. This is like, I think, because then you can't manage people going in and out of the conversation. I find.
Well, you can only have one conversation. If 2 people are having, you can't have people talking to each other, or it's all, you can't hear anything.
But I mean, you can't manage even one person talking at a time, because then there's these weird pauses, and then people talk over each other and don't realize it at first. And I don't know. Somebody says, we've done 6 people. You have to be comfortable with the chaos. I mean, I guess that's right. We had 5 this weekend and it was challenging. I mean, maybe depending on the group and kind of the vibe. But yeah, I think it's hard. More than 3 becomes distracting. Yeah, I just feel like it starts to become a lot about managing the interface rather than just like having a conversation. I find, but then I am not the most adept with technology.
A hack that people are talking, there's a hack has come out, Gretch, with Zoom, which is use the chat feature. So if people write something down, you know, and you can also chat between 2 people. So that can be good too. So that's a good hack.
That's a good hack.
And someone says it's awkward to end the call. And that is very true.
And I feel like a social call on Zoom can't last more than an hour. I mean, I'm like,
an hour does feel max.
Yeah, you can't. It's not like, because if you were hanging out with somebody, you would think like maybe 2 hours or 2.5 hours. Oh, somebody says the Saturday Night skit about Zoom was hilarious. Who saw that? I mean, it was like, it wasn't even like a parody, because it was just that is how it is. Like, somebody there's like the standard 3 jokes, all of which I make all the time, and now I will never do it again. Somebody says I love this chat feature. Yeah, Saturday Night Live was so funny. I mean, it was funny. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. It was pretty funny. Yeah. Oh, somebody says 30-minute max. 30 minutes. I feel like it's hardly even worth putting it on the calendar, because I'm like, I don't know. Well, everybody. Okay. So anyway, let's switch to accountability.
Accountability.
Right. So if you're just joining us, it's Gretchen Rubin, Elizabeth Kraft. We are the hosts of the Happier with Gretchen Rubin podcast, and now is the accountability check-in, where if there's something you want to be held accountable for, and you want us to be looking at you and monitoring you and holding you to your word, put it in the comments. We will start to look. And if you've been doing what you meant to do, if you've been walking 20 and 20, if you've been reading every day, if you've been fighting the urge to do snack bursts like Elizabeth.
Yes, my snack burst group.
Yes. Give us a gold star. Give yourself a good star and let us see it, so that we know that you are doing, like, you're sticking to it. And COVID-19 journal, 20 for 20 biking. Excellent.
Wow. Great.
Yes, and remember, you're a day 102 if you're doing walk 20 and 20. Pretty soon we will not be able to keep track of the numbers, but so far, right? No,
I think you're way past the 100.
Yeah, no, what are
like 104?
I think April 9th was 100. Yeah, somebody gold star for reading and walking. I want to snack well tomorrow. That's good. Lots of gold stars. So this is good. Exercise, yoga 4 or 5 times a week. That's excellent. Read a bunch this weekend. That's great. I want to start writing. That's great. Okay. We're going to hold you accountable to that.
Okay. Yeah.
So
start writing. Just do it.
Start writing. Like, okay, this is where I have to switch to my better than before head, like, which is all about habit change. What does that look like for you? What time of day?
Couldn't hear what you said.
Sorry, my phone is talking. What time of day is that? Do you want to write for half an hour a day? Do you want to write 2 pages a day? Are you a rebel where you just want to wait until you feel like doing it? Do you need to set up an accountability partner? If you need accountability, you can create an accountability group on the Better app, which is my free app. So go to betterapp.us on desktop, or you can just go to Better Gretchen Rubin in the App Store, and you can form an accountability group. If it's a questioner, it's like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing it in this way? There's a million ways to help set yourself up. Oh, and if you go to gretchenrubin.com/resources, it's called the checklist for habit change, and it lists the 21 strategies that you can use to make a habit if you want the habit of writing. And so you can apply all the, because for an important habit, and a challenging habit, you might need to use many strategies, which is a lot easier than it sounds. In everyday life, we use multiple strategies all the time to keep our habits going. And so you just want to make sure that you give yourself the best shot possible.
And I just want to remind people on the subject of writing that you don't need to feel like writing to write.
No.
In fact, you probably never feel like writing, so don't wait for inspiration. No. Just write.
Yeah. Oh, you know what I finally read, Elizabeth, because you told me to, is I read On Writing by Stephen King, which I highly recommend. Oh. He is just like the most charming person in the world.
Yes.
And I highly recommend that book.
It's really a memoir as well.
Well, yeah, like I think the first like 2/3 is it's a memoir that it's about what made him the writer that he is. So it's not a general memoir. It's kind of like bits and pieces of his life, but he had a very interesting life. He had a very, very tough upbringing. Really no money in his family. His father was gone. And he got in a lot of trouble for various things. And he had to get sober. But it's so fun to hear about, like, when he wrote Carrie and he broke out. Yes. And I think they were living in a trailer at that time, or some little teeny place. And it was just, he's just he just seems like such a nice person.
By the way, Gretchen, somebody said their accountability is to think positively about their husband. And I think a lot of people in close quarters, people are getting on each other's nerves. Elizabeth, so I think all of us should think well of the people in our home.
But I love your mantra for this, which is explain what you mean by, if not Adam, an exact replica, which is, I love that.
Oh, right. Just when I remind myself, if I'm annoyed with Adam or whatever, that if I wasn't with Adam, I would just go out and be looking for someone exactly like him. So what is the point?
I just love that. It's like, it's sort of deeply romantic and also extremely like realistic. I mean, very funny. Somebody says, I'm going to get my ironing and laundry done while watching those broadcasts. Oh, because I think there's, is it the broadcast about there's bad weather in some parts of the country?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I know you're like, don't we get a break from like hurricane season and tornadoes?
Tornadoes.
Because we grew up in tornado country for sure. And so we're in touch with that. Look at all these gold stars. This is wonderful. I love.
Good job, everybody.
Okay. So what is our challenge for tomorrow?
But I just our challenge. I have our challenge for tomorrow.
Okay, because I blanked out.
Gretchen, it's on the topic of inertia.
Yes.
And my challenge, because one thing is, at first we were playing a lot of games.
Oh yes, this is a
family games.
This is a good one.
And then once again, inertia has set in, and we have not been playing games the last like 7 or 8 days. We've not played a game. So my challenge is, play a game as a family or whoever you're with, or whatever you want to do. I mean, I picked play a game because I think it's something we all do enjoy. It bonds us. It's away from screens, et cetera, et cetera. But whatever you all do it.
Right.
Fight inertia.
Right. So whatever that was, that family activity that we're like, it's great that we're doing this as a family because it's help us like get along better and spend quality time together and get through this difficult period and support each other. Whatever it is that you were doing, do it again.
Jigsaw puzzle.
Yes, we played a game called Ticket to Ride, which
people love.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it, and I don't like playing games usually, and I don't like learning new rules, but I did learn the rules. I forced myself, and now I really like it. But we've only played it one time, so we need to play it again. So.
Okay.
All right.
And I'm going to play Mastermind with Jack because I love Mastermind. It's an old game, retro.
Okay. Yeah. Put in the comments the games that you like because maybe people are looking for new games. There's always Uno. I could play Uno for the rest of my life. I have played a bazillion games of Uno, and I will always play Uno, but everybody else has kind of outgrown Uno except for me. But I think it's a great game. Card game. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining our conversation. We will be back here tomorrow. And in the meantime, let's all keep our hands clean and our minds clear. Bye.
Bye, everyone.